City Manager. Dave?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. If you all remember at the beginning of our work in the current crisis, I talked a little bit about us being in a sprint. And I just want to acknowledge that we're still moving pretty fast, and not suggesting that this is a time that we're going to do any let up, but it certainly feels like we've moved more into a marathon at this point. And just acknowledging that the road to recovery is going to be a long road for us all, I think. And I think it's a good time to remember we all need to take care of ourselves. And brings me to my point that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And just want to remind all of our workers out there that we do need to take care of ourselves. We do have an employee assistance program that was established to offer free confidential counseling for anyone who needs it. And just want to encourage all of our staff to take advantage of the resources available to them, and to also take time to be able to mentally refresh during this long road to recovery. The first team that I want to recognize today is the homeless response team. As you all know, the homeless response team really was engaged in the crisis from the very beginning, and just did a wonderful job to stand up multiple congregate shelters to serve our homeless population primarily. And just want to do a call out to Kelly Hemphill and James Stagey. The work that they've done with many others in their teams and in other departments has just been amazing. Once we got those shelters stood up and had to move into staffing those locations, and just want to appreciate the effort that went into the staffing as well as the setup. And really thanks to all of that work, hundreds of our communities most vulnerable have access to beds and restrooms and showers and laundry and meals, and connections to medical professionals, personal protection equipment, and really many other services. So work that we've done in partnership with the county, and just really proud of the homeless response team and all the city staff involved with standing up and staffing our shelters. The next team I want to recognize is our food distribution team. Just to remind you all that back in mid-March, Santa Clara County did request that the city take the lead in coordinating countywide food distribution. And I really want to highlight the tremendous leadership of Angel Rios.
I cannot really open up my
this effort. It's actually a branch in the EOC called the Food and Necessities Branch. And the branch is led jointly with Neil Ruffino and Dolan Beckel, who have really full-time now working on that. And really, it's leveraged the resources of staff in PRNS, IT, DOT, City Manager's Office, and of course, many private sector and nonprofit partners. You'll hear more about the details of our food distribution program directly from Angel in a little bit. But I just wanted to take this opportunity to directly thank Angel and Neil and Dolan and all the teams that have been involved, including our partners outside the city organization. So today, we'll have another update from the EOC. There'll be some information shared with you all on our compliance with the health order, and Kip and Derek from Stanford will be leading that conversation. As I mentioned, Angel will give a fairly detailed update on where we're at with food and necessities. Kip will provide a little bit of information, a summary of the new health orders that were effective yesterday. And then we'll also have an update from Rosalind and Hector Estrada from Fire on where we're at with development services since yesterday. Construction activity started up both in the private sector and our public work. And our public work, I think we'll be back next week with an update on that. And I guess I'll just end my part here by just acknowledging where I started in terms of the marathon that we're on. And I think, although it's great that we're opening back up services, I think from an operational standpoint, it's really important to note that reopening is probably going to be even more demanding on us than the closure process was, just because of the complexities and the nuances to it, and the fact that a lot of people have been working hard for a very long time. Nonetheless, it's super important that we position ourselves for being able to reopen, but just also acknowledge that many challenges ahead. But I know that we are up to it. And so at this point, I'm going to hand it off to Kip to continue on with the update.
Thank you, Dave. Kip Harkness, Deputy City Manager and the outgoing Emergency Operations Center Director. On behalf of Lee Wilcox, the incoming Emergency Operations Center Director, and myself, I want to acknowledge that this work is really done by the team, the 563 members now of the Emergency Operations Center, as well as the over 5,150 employees who continue to provide essential services on a day-to-day basis. So as Dave said, we're going to take you through a deep dive in a couple of issues, but before I do that, I just want to highlight 4 emerging areas that we are organizing teams around. And what we found is that, from problem and opportunity to identification, it takes about 3 to 5 weeks to actually sort of sort through that, figure it out, organize the team, formalize the team, and get it operational. And I know that all of these issues are very important to the council and our community, but they're ones that we are beginning to go from problem and opportunity set to fully operational. And they include digital inclusion, which you'll hear more about in item 3.4, virtual community engagement, which we have now stood up a formal branch within the Emergency Operations Center. This back to work, it's different now. Teamwork that we're doing on how we welcome back our employees as we begin to gradually, stage by stage, move back into a broader range of services. And then also really working with our county partners to understand our role in testing, tracing, and supported isolation. So all 4 of those activities go on in parallel with everything else that we've mentioned and has been discussed here. So let me start first with, again, a reminder of our roadmap, which has served us well, which allows us to focus on slowing and reducing the spread of COVID-19 and supporting our most at-risk people. Again, the entire 563-person team is really organized in cross-functional teams against each of these priorities and working on a weekly cadence where we are moving from ideas to action within a 7-day sprint. So in terms of compliance, I'm going to turn this over to Derek Oyang, who's a partner of ours at Stanford, to let him walk through some of the amazing data that they've been able to provide to us on compliance side that's helped inform how we approach compliance in parks, how we approach compliance in neighborhoods, and has resulted in adjusted and targeted messaging and compliance efforts as we've learned more about where we do and aren't able to comply. So at this point, I'm going to introduce Derek, and I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so that he can begin sharing his. Derek,
thank you.
Take it away.
Thank you. So, Council, my name is Derek Oyang. I've met some of you in person before, but for those I haven't met, I'm a lecturer at Stanford University in a program called the Future Bay Initiative. And the Future Bay Initiative is a research, education, and practice partnership. You might have known us by a different name, but we've been working with the City of San Jose since 2015, starting with some projects in the planning arena, such as a design for the Bay Area site back in 2015. And in the coming years, we added to that work with the Mayor's Office, and in particular with District 3's Councilmember Perales on the Sustainable Development Goals, helping to represent the city as an academic partner in some UN events, and also continuing the conversation into Climate Smart San Jose. In the most recent year, we added to that work on climate risk in particular, working with Kip and others on thinking about both sea level rise as well as upstream flooding as it relates to the Anderson Dam. And with the COVID crisis, we were able to shift our attention in this most recent academic quarter to COVID-19 rapid response. And we've got an overall team of about 20 students and 8 mentors that are involved in a variety of projects with partners throughout the Bay Area. But what I'm going to highlight here is the work in particular of some of those students that has been motivated by having reached out to Kip early on in this process. He illuminated to us the need for some more granular data insights on social distancing compliance. And in our program, we happen to have a data partnership with a company called SafeGraph that provides anonymized mobile device data down to the level of home census block groups and destination addresses. You might have seen a lot of coverage in the New York Times and other media with this type of information. And we figured, hey, we can make this more available to decision makers in the city of San Jose. So I'm going to switch to a demo of the live dashboard, which is available to anybody to look at as well. This is the result of about 4 to 5 weeks of work so far, and we've had bi-weekly conversations with the EOC compliance branch, in which we've been able to take their feedback and recommendations and turn that right back around into updates to the dashboard. The first tab here shows the heart of the information we have, which is down at the census block group level, in which as you hover over different neighborhoods, you're able to see for a given day since the beginning of this year, what percentage of residents in that block group are we estimating left home that day. So the darker these colors are, then the more people from that block group left during the day. And that could be for work, that could be for recreation, that could be for many different matters. On the right side of the screen, you're able to see a time series of that same information with a black line representing the average for the whole city, again, from January till just a few days ago. And you're seeing right around the time of the shelter-in-place order for the county, an overall drop in the percentage of people who are leaving home. So that would correspond to increased social distancing compliance. But there's much more you can dive into, either the change in weekends versus weekdays, or just how different compliance is neighborhood by neighborhood. You'll see there's an option to highlight individual districts in this view as well. And we're starting to create some of those high-level insights as part of sparking conversation with our San Jose partners. I'll quickly show what's on the other 2 tabs we have so far on the dashboard. Because some of the representation on the compliance branch is specifically from the PRNS, Parks, Recreation, Neighborhood Services. They had some suggestions to really drill down into parks in particular. And our data allows us to drill down to any place of activity. That could be a grocery store or so forth. But we're showing what can be done looking at parks in particular. So here we're basically showing a subset of the data we have, but able to see visits to parks in particular, how that's changed over time, but allow our partners to be able to highlight pretty specific parks. So for example, looking at the end of April here, Almaden Lake Park seems to be at the top in terms of visits. You would be able to type in and search for Almaden Lake Park in particular. And on the map, you'd focus in on that park, as well as on the time series, see the individual visit counts for that park in particular. And without having talked too deeply about this yet with our partners, we are starting to see for particular popular parks an increase in visits in the past few weeks. Last tab here is general demographics. So what we're seeing here are some scatter plots, and I'll explain how to read these. Every single blue circle you see on the plot here represents one block group in San Jose. And the vertical height of these blue circles is the percent leaving home. So it's similar to the data you were seeing on the first tab. Pretty much all of these block groups are in the 70 to 90% range of percent leaving home. This is measured for pre-COVID-19. So this was January to March, roughly, of this year. And so we would expect most people are leaving home during the day for most block groups in San Jose. This data is also shown in the x-axis spread across based on different income levels. So the block groups on the right side of this chart are generally higher income earners in that block group. And before shelter in place, we were seeing that if you had higher income in that block group, you had slightly higher movement about the city. Now, the cool thing about this diagram is that on the bottom is an animation slider. You can go from before shelter in place to after shelter in place, which would be basically end of March onwards. So as I switch over to after shelter in place, this is still income as it relates to social distancing compliance. So you'll see that on the whole, blue circles have moved downwards on the chart, which is just to say that pretty much all block groups have reduced their movement. The percent leaving home has decreased. But you'll notice that there was a different kind of shift happening as well, which is that circles on the far right side of this chart, which are again the highest income earning block groups, were able to change their behavior more. It dropped further down on this chart to have a lower overall movement from home. So you can say that those were the most compliant block groups from a social distancing perspective, compared to the lower income earning block groups, which you can maybe interpret this as maybe not having the ability to change and adapt to the circumstance as much because of economic or other reasons. And we have these types of plots for other population characteristics like language and age, and we're going to continue diving into this kind of work because it might reveal to us some of the underlying factors that contribute to social distancing compliance and can help us prioritize and target the kinds of outreach and support we give to our community members to be able to keep them safer. So that was a quick tour of this dashboard. Again, this is a work in progress pretty much on a day-to-day basis, and we've really appreciated the opportunity to engage closely with long-standing partners now in the city of San Jose. And I look forward to opportunities to engage directly with the council as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Derek. And let me just monkey with my screen here and get us back to where we were, hopefully. Really appreciate the deep partnership and the ongoing partnership with Stanford on this. These insights have allowed us to think about how we do our messaging and how we make sure that we're focusing on the areas where we have compliance issues. So food necessities, as Dave mentioned, this is a huge lift for us and a new department, essentially. And so I want to turn this one over to Angel Rios, our Deputy City Manager, and also the Emergency Operations Center Operations Section Lead, to walk us through the latest and greatest from food and necessities. Angel, it's all you. I'm happy to do the slide deck for you.
All right, thank you, Kip. Thank you, Dave, Mayor, council members. Good to see you even through Zoom here. Want to ground kind of the work that we, or kind of really frame the work that we've done around food distribution around three overarching objectives. These objectives are really what has driven our whole countywide food effort. And they are, first and foremost, making sure that we feed our most vulnerable. Two, that we maximize the existing food networks that are in place. Our goal is not to replicate, but to start with kind of the resources that are in the community already. And thirdly, scale for a widespread food crisis, kind of thinking worst case, should things escalate exponentially to the point where we have to do mass feeding. And so really those are the three overarching objectives that have driven our work. As you know, early on, from the onset of the COVID response, we were asked to play a lead role, not only within our city, but countywide around food distribution. And if you take a look at this here, we've only been in this for the last 5 weeks, although sometimes it kind of feels like 5 years, but just over the course of the last 5 weeks, you know, the real focus was we need to go fast. And I'm real glad we did, because what we saw literally within a few days of the emergency COVID response was congregate sites going down, distribution sites going down, again, for valid reasons, largely, in response to kind of fear around, well, you know, how should we continue going forward? And so we immediately, literally within days, kind of jumped on that whole issue and made sure that we maintained and preserved existing sites, starting with our City of San Jose senior congregation sites, and then also working very quickly with Second Harvest Food Bank. And so one of the first tools that we developed was this GIS map that right now is linked to Silicon Valley Strong. And this has been an excellent resource. And we didn't start from scratch. The first thing we did was we reached out to the people that really are experts in this field, and that's Second Harvest Food Bank. And they already had a pre-existing GIS map. So we started with their map, and we basically pulled some staff together from within the city, working with Second Harvest Food Bank, and we added a few additional overlays. We started with the more than 300 Second Harvest distribution sites, then we added our senior congregation sites on top of that, and then we also added our school sites, the USDA funded school sites countywide, as well as churches and other food distributors, formal and informal, that we were aware of. We then created a dashboard to get a sense for tracking production, need, and that kind of thing. And this is one of our latest dashboards. And if you take a look at this dashboard here, if you just compare this dashboard alone to the one just a week prior to that, what you'll see is that in terms of the net number of meals, we actually increased just over a 1 week period by an additional 748,000 weekly meals that were served. Now that's not net starting from week 1, that's just net increase from last week, right? If you break that number down daily, that represents 150,000 meals rather a day. So you can see that COVID is definitely having an impact on our community as measured by the need for food, right? In terms of economic hardship that it's causing, If you can go back to that slide, Kip, I just want to point out three things that I think are really, really important. One, you can see that the biggest increase was in Second Harvest Food Bank distribution sites. And so that's kind of one of the pieces of data that is important to look at. The other one is when you take a look at, and I'm really proud of this one here, the city, county targeted homeless placements, that one increased significantly. And what I'm proud about that one is that the city and county and a lot of nonprofit partners have really emphasized sheltering the unhoused. And what we've done is we've worked food distribution delivery directly, whether they're at motels, hotels, in one of our shelter sites, South Hall, Parkside. And that number continues to increase, which also then tells us that more and more unhoused are being sheltered safely. And so anyway, just wanted to give you that snapshot there. Our team uses that dashboard weekly to, again, measure and monitor production. Moving on to this next slide, congregate senior meal sites. Just in this 5-week period, we have more than doubled our output in terms of senior sites. And if you take a look at it, seniors are our most COVID-19 at-risk population. And so what this definitely shows here, these are the 13 senior congregate sites here. We were able to double that, which I think also is a good indicator that we're reaching the most vulnerable population. So next slide. How do we make this happen? Well, it's definitely more than a few folks. We have a pretty massive team that we literally have stood up in short order here. And this, and I want to take a couple of minutes to kind of go over this because I think it's, one, I'd like to highlight the people that are listed here, and you'll see some of the various names. I don't have time, obviously, to read out each and every one of them, but I got to just really, just give a big shout out to the city staff, a lot of our community-based partners that have really helped us stand this up. As you know, the food distribution section is a branch within the EOC that reports up to Kip and Lee. Jim and I rotate around EOC operations chief. I lead the food and necessities, working very closely with my two co-leaders, and that's Dolan Beckel and Neil Rufino. And I want to really give them some big props too. They have just been relentless in this work. And then what we've done underneath those structures there is we've identified a number of different subsections, starting with supply resiliency. We want to make sure that we're not just meeting the immediate need, but we're also monitoring supply and source, right? We want to take a look at distribution operations. We want to make sure, we know that this is no easy task, especially since we've been really kind of coordinating this county-wide, and truth be told, everyone was kind of doing this independently, building again on the strong relationship we have with Second Harvest Food Bank. We've been able to just each day get a little bit better around how food gets distributed, and we have a whole section around that. We also have a section around business architecture, also assessing, hey, based on productivity right now, are there any flaws in our system? Are there any signs that we need to take a look at? Meat plant closures, the flow of supply into the valley, and those kinds of things. We have a team just looking at those specific things. And of course, we have communications. We've also had to set up a whole EOC funding and contracts, because as you know, nothing's very easy. Nothing's always easy with FEMA and the whole reimbursement process. So we've been trying to figure that out literally as we're doing this work. But I want to call your attention to a couple of advisory committees that we have stood up. And I hesitate to call them committees because that sounds bureaucratic, but these are really working advisory teams. One is we call the Nonprofit Leadership Council, and there we pulled in representatives from the county, our city, Second Harvest Food Bank, the Health Trust, Catholic Charities, SourceWise, First Five, Silicon Valley Council of Nonprofits, all aimed around, one, making sure that we have streamlined communication, two, that we're identifying problem areas that need to be resolved and escalated and resolved, more importantly, very quickly. And thirdly, and most importantly, to make sure that we are actually meeting the emerging need that exists, and that we're able to pivot accordingly. So that's one advisory group that has been extremely helpful. We have a weekly stand-up call with this leadership team, and they've been very helpful. The other one is a Food Policy Advisory Committee, and this is also has representatives. Director Michael Bellier from the county, Dr. Dewan from County Office of Education, Second Harvest Food Bank, SVCN, Google, San Jose, different staff. And this policy team is looking at more than just what we're doing now. They're kind of looking at this whole food situation. And we're also looking at, okay, based on all the work that we've done in the last 5 weeks, what are some policy issues that we also need to really work on a parallel track? So for example, last week we had our meeting and we unanimously agreed that one of our main policy areas of focus needs to be increasing the accessibility of programs like CalFresh, WIC, Snap Online. Just in the last 4 or 5 weeks, CalFresh has increased by 60%, and yet we still haven't even, yet that resource is still not accessible to everyone. So we're developing strategies aimed at increasing the accessibility of CalFresh and programs like that. So this is not just about feeding people individually in the short term, it's also looking at policy issues on a parallel track. And then of course we have our liaison branches working, we often hear from Kim, who's our liaison lead, as well as Chris Burton, and then our work between city and county EOC. So we can go to the next slide. This is, again, kind of a deeper dive into some of the staff. And if you take a quick second to kind of just browse the staff, again, hats off to all these individuals. And just in terms of the support of this food distribution structure, we have about 109 city staff, and that's not counting staff, and you'll hear about this later, that we deployed out to nonprofits. So 109 within the EOC structure that I just identified doing this work of feeding the most vulnerable. Next slide, please. Over the course of the last few weeks, we've really been heartened by what we've come to kind of call food heroes, and there are so many food heroes out there, but we wanted to kind of call your attention to a few. In this first picture here, this is Irma Martinez, and she's actually a staff worker working in the cafeteria over at Dorsa, but she's been there, she's been relentless about working there at Dorsa Elementary School. Just at that site alone, more than 122,000 meals have been served between that and 6 other sites, I should say. In that second picture, this is a volunteer. His name is Mark Mers, and he's a driver, and he loads up his vehicle. He shows up, and he's doing all this on his dime. Again, he's a volunteer. I mean, just COVID, it's with all the pain that it's caused a lot of people and families. It's also brought out a lot of greatness in people, and Mark is just one of those individuals. This third picture down below here, this is Peggy Edge. And this is interesting because Peggy Edge was actually a distributor of Meals on Wheels food. But given she's 81 years old, and we have her permission to share that. And she, given her vulnerable classification in age range, she became a recipient of services. And so she went from being a driver to a recipient, and that's been awesome to see too. So again, food heroes, they've become just as important as first responders as they've been direct responders. So next slide, please. This work has not just been a City of San Jose lift. In fact, this work, bottom line, could not be done without partnerships with the nonprofit sector. And right here you have a list of organizations where we've already been able to identify funding. We've already taken this recommendation before you. It's already been approved. These are funding arrangements that have already been approved by you, the council, and are already in the works. What we were able to do, thanks to coordination with the housing department, is take $1.2 million in CDBG funding and redeploy that money directly to food distribution sites. So you see the Health Trust, Loaves and Fishes, Martha's Kitchen, and First Five. The First Five one I want to kind of highlight because this is one of a two-pronged First Five partnership specific to diapers and wipes. As you notice, we make reference to food and necessities. So it's not just food, but it's also other necessities as we identify the need. And diapers and wipes in low-income communities has definitely emerged as one of the top needs. First Five stepped up. working with a lot of other nonprofit partners. They use their family resource centers as distribution sites, and we've been able to fund this out of this CDBG pot of money to make that happen. Next slide, please. Similarly, in addition to grant money and funds, there's also a lot of different support that we provide. This is just a couple examples. With Second Harvest Food Bank, for example, we have already provided to date over 25,000 masks, bottles of hand sanitizer, more than 17 thermometers, and again, working in partnership with them to also make sure that they are supported as they're doing what they do best, which is feeding people. And again, you see the first 5 of Santa Clara County, that additional funding enabled them to provide 7,500 kits to families in need. Next slide, please. If we kind of step back, the Silicon Valley strong website has been a blessing in disguise here. I mean, people have really responded well to it. We have received more than 3,000 volunteer intake. With respect to food alone, we have already deployed 2,361 as of yesterday to various sites. Some of the sites that are recipients of many of our volunteers, you have Aki, you have Elam Rock, you have Catholic Charities, you have Salvation Army, Sacred Heart Community Center, the Portuguese Senior Center, La Comida of Palo Alto, St. Isabel's Kitchen, Sunnyvale Community Services. The list goes on. They're all listed there. Many nonprofits were hit pretty hard, especially a lot of the food distribution sites with the loss of their own volunteers. And we were able to really stand up and deploy volunteers, make sure they were trained, properly equipped with PPE to make sure that food distribution remains seamless and consistent. And again, done in partnership with these groups. We support them, they feed the community. It's a great partnership. In addition to that, we've also deployed 53 City of San Jose staff to some of these nonprofit organizations. Oftentimes we get specific requests, whether it's administrative, forklift drivers, you name it. There's a number of different specific requests. We have a lot of talent within our city organization. We were able to identify more than 50 city staff and actually deploy them and place them there at these locations. This is another example. In terms of planned community nonprofit funding request, right now we are in talks and we are working through negotiations, working with additional nonprofits. The World Central Kitchen, they're going to be one of our main providers for, you may have heard last week, the governor's state restaurant pilot. And the mayor's office is and their leadership has been very involved with helping to drive that program and that concept. We've been in step with the mayor's office and with the governor's office around this, and shortly you'll hear more information about a rollout here in our city, and actually it'll be a countywide strategy. San Jose Unified School District, the Health Trust, Hunger at Home, Team San Jose, First Five, Vegelution. Again, another list of all the different nonprofit partners. I do want to take a second here to also, acknowledge some challenges that we're having, because many of our nonprofits, and again, kudos to all of them, they have stepped up and they have been providing this work. We have not been able to move fast enough to get these contracts out the door. And I could come up with 10 legitimate reasons as to why, but the bottom line is, really, FEMA themselves were not really prepared for a pandemic such as this. And so in a lot of ways, the rules are being developed around reimbursement and funding. We have literally standing meetings with FEMA, Cal OES, and we internally, we believe we have a path forward to really expedite these contracts. Our intention was to come to you today with the first tranche of those. But as of a call yesterday with FEMA, we needed to pivot and make some changes. That was a very frustrating delay, especially frustrating, I know, to our nonprofit partners. So, but I on the one hand, I want to acknowledge their work, and secondly, I also want to assure you, the council, and our nonprofit partners, that this is one of our #1 priorities, because we recognize that this also creates an economic hardship on our nonprofit partners, and that is not lost on us. And so we're working around the clock to make sure we get this moving forward in terms of our nonprofit partners. But as you can see, we have many of them. And again, I want to thank them for their service. Next slide, please. We've also engaged the private sector, not to the extent that we have the nonprofit sector, but I want to kind of call out a couple of partnerships that we have. DoorDash really stepped in a very significant way, especially with the Health Trust. When COVID response broke out, we lost a lot of our drivers that were providing and delivering the actual Meals on Wheels service. So we were able to reach out to DoorDash and develop a public-private partnership, really negotiate a really extremely good deal around that transaction. And we were able to kind of keep not only the pre-existing users of Meals on Wheels fed, but we've also have increased pretty exponentially, and which is why you'll also see we'll be coming back with some additional recommendations on more funding for the Health Trust, just to continue to support that. And then on that last slide, Revolution Foods is another one. Revolution Foods, we entered into an agreement with them to, number one, buy capacity, and number two, to use them as a safety net as we work with especially our school-based programs that some of which we're having a little trouble getting started early on. And so we were able to tap into that Revolution Foods contract and provide that safety net. And what we've done with that contract is we're specifically focused on vulnerable communities, low-income communities that really need additional response based on just the economic hardship of COVID. This slide here basically gives you a snapshot of completed and planned funding to date. You can see that the bulk of our partnerships are very nonprofit centric, and we believe they should be. And at the same time, we're also reaching out to the private sector. And I think I have one last slide here, which is the next one. Now, worst case situation, in the event that need continues to emerge and economic hardship continues to impact families, one of the things that we've also done with our futures group, as they've identified the need to really scale up, we have a strategy in place where we have reserved capacity with Revolution Foods in the event that we have to scale up to the tune of 150,000 meals per day, not per week, but per day. So in the event that there's issues, that something happens with stockpile, with availability of resources, we have been able to get a commitment from Revolution Foods to buy capacity. And as you know, there are many cities that are really reaching out to many of these different food companies. We, given our relationship with them and our partnership over this COVID, have reserved some of that capacity. So worst case, this is our rainy day situation here. We'll be able to tap into that funding or that contract should we need to utilize them in the future. That is not a executed contract. That is kind of waiting in the wings in the event we need to scale up. And at that point, that pretty much is my presentation. And again, I just want to take this time to really give a big shout out to the many staff that are really the food heroes with all this. And thank you.
Angel, thank you so very much. We don't get much of a pause in the EOC. So actually, this is the first time I've had to kind of sit and just listen to that from you. And it just, frankly, it's really inspiring, even though I'm part of it, to see and hear all the things that you have done with your leadership and your team has done with their leadership and action. And I think also about the frameworks that we use to think about our work, such as the equity framework and how this affects those who have the least. And I think, one of the things that you and I have discussed is I see this as very much responsive to that equity framework where we are standing up literally an entire new department focused exclusively on a needs-driven approach for those who are most vulnerable. So big appreciation from me to you and the team for your work. I wanted to take a moment and bring us all up to speed on the new county's public health orders that took effect yesterday, May 4th, and just highlight a couple of key aspects from those orders. As most of you know, and we'll hear in more detail in a little bit, all construction projects can now resume, provided they comply with safety protocols. Commercial as well as residential real estate transactions are allowed to fully resume, as well as the supporting services. And then for essential workers only, childcare establishments, summer camps, schools, and other programs can operate um, uh, in these stable pods of 12 to provide support for those essential workers. I think many of those are, including us, are still figuring out exactly how to do that, but that is now permissible for essential workers under the new county orders. Outdoor businesses are now allowed to operate, and I do want to stipulate those are the types of businesses that took place outdoors before the orders, not all the kinds of businesses you could conceivably run outdoors if you tried. So things like gardening and lawn care and other things like that are definitely allowed. You can't just run a business and have it outside and have it qualify, however. As the other thing that's allowed is all residential moves are now allowed to proceed without any complication, and outdoor recreation facilities that do not encourage gathering or contain high-touch equipment can open. So translation, you can golf as long as you do it with singles and in compliance with the public health guidance on distancing. So I also want to draw attention in the new order, there are clarification on the indicators that will guide us as we go forward on getting out of this and changing and adding more services. There are 5 indicators. The one at the top is the number of hospitalizations, which we have seen good progress on, and that is flattening. Number 2 is sufficient hospital capacity to meet the needs of our residents. We are green on that as well. At the moment, we have that capacity. Number 3 is testing and an adequate testing amount. We are not meeting that threshold yet. We are probably at best a quarter of the way countywide toward that, but there are significant efforts that the county is undertaking, and we are collaborating with them to begin to ramp up testing. Number 4 is case investigation, contact tracing, isolation, quarantine. We are also not where we need to be on this one, particularly the case investigation and contact tracing. And the county, again, is in the lead and is ramping up efforts on that. And then the last one relates to personal protective equipment. The biggest gap in this is our access at the county level and city level to gowns, chem suits, and other protective measures. Most of the other forms of personal protective equipment, including the masks, we have a 30-day supply on, but we'd like to boost that up to a 60-day supply. So we've got a long way to go on these indicators before we can see serious shift. And again, as a reminder, the way we've been talking about this is a long game, probably a very long game, with a gradual and iterative return to a broader range of activities. We still consider ourselves in stage 5, though we have opened up a range of services such as construction and others. We still haven't seen that broader reopening that we would characterize as stage 6. So we are beginning the preparation work for stage 6, 7, and 8 from a city perspective, including making sure we can do that in a manner that's safe and well communicated to all of those employees who are essentially coming back to a different way of doing work, or in some cases, an entirely different job that they may not have been doing before they left. So the next deep dive we're going to have, and the last one, is around development services and inspections. And at the risk of stealing some of the good thunder of the good work of others, one of the things that's really great as a member of the city manager's office is you get to see all of the things that our city does, and occasionally you get out and actually watch some of our workers on their job. And I had a chance this Monday morning to go out with the inspectors, one of the inspectors on a residential project in North San Pedro, and spend some time with him on his rounds and look how he was handling the PPE, how I was handling the PPE, the safe social distancing, communications, and dealing with everything in a different world, as were the construction workers having to deal with a new world for them. The good news is the inspection was able to proceed safely. The construction was ongoing, and the output of the construction is going to be more housing units built. So it was really a nice way to start out the week for me, thanks to the good work of the development services team. And so having stolen a little bit of their thunder, let me introduce the people who made all of that possible. Rosalind Huey, in particular, will take us through this, and we'll also be supported by Hector Estrada from the fire department as we go through. So Rosalind, I'm going to turn it over to you now, and I'm happy to run the slide deck for you.
Thank you, Kip. Rosalind Huey, Director of the Department of Planning, Building, and Code Enforcement. Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council, and members of the public. So last week, I was with you sharing about our work in terms of continuing to deliver development services during the shelter in order. And we're very excited and thankful that last week the county did revise the order, as Kip mentioned. And starting yesterday, all construction activity can now resume, which means our inspection team are now able to conduct all on-site building inspections. So we're very excited about that. Next slide, Kip. So just wanted to share with you some of the key steps that we undertook to make sure that our inspection team had the tools and the resources they need to get back to work yesterday morning. So first and foremost, safety. Safety is very important in terms of the line of work that they do. It's always an issue every day in their jobs, but particularly now during the COVID-19 pandemic, we want to make sure that our inspectors are safe and that they can work safely. So we were able to hold a safety training for all of our inspectors that was held Friday morning. They got lots of good information and instruction regarding safe practices. We were also able to put together a frequently asked question document because obviously they had some questions, and we want to make sure that we were able to provide them with good information, good consistent information. So we were able to share that with them as well. We were able to secure all of the PPE that was needed now that we have additional inspectors out in the field. So staff actually work on securing all of that and getting it organized over the weekend. So yesterday, all of the inspectors had their equipment. And then we're glad about this final point that a couple of weeks ago, we were able to implement a new digital inspection form for all of our inspectors to use. And we're really glad now that this has been implemented because we're moving full steam ahead. And we know that this will actually provide additional safety for our inspectors. So they no longer will have to handle paper. They can use their tablets and complete their inspection forms on that device. So secondly, around the area of communication, also very important, making sure that we were delivering very clear and consistent messages for all of our customers. So we immediately updated all of our information on the PPCE website. We updated the information on sjpermits.org, which is our public portal. So this is the place where our customers go to get their information and to actually apply for many permits online. We did direct outreach to our developers and construction roundtable. So this is a group that we meet with regularly, and we got an email out to them last Thursday to make sure that they knew that we were ramping up to start work yesterday. And then we provided an item in Friday's flash report, so members of the public were fully aware. And then, of course, we did some direct contact with many of our customers. Around scheduling, obviously, we had a lot of work to do. So we wanted to be proactive in getting to our customers, particularly on our high impact projects. We have a list, I believe, of 27 different high impact projects. We coordinated with the Office of Economic Development staff in contacting those customers. And then we had already been contacting many of our customers whose appointments had already been canceled when the order first took in effect. So we did outreach to them. And again, we provided updated information on the public portal. And then around the issue of compliance, again, this is very important because we want our inspectors to concentrate on their jobs. They're on the site to conduct building inspections. They're not on those sites to be police, right? So we want to make sure, first of all, they had the information available to them to say, hey, what do I do if I do see something that is in violation of the county protocols? So we trained them on that information. We coordinated with the police department. They actually have set aside compliance cars that our inspectors can contact should they encounter a violation on site. And then we worked with the EOC in developing SOPs for our inspectors, again, to report violations. Next slide, Kip. So this information is very important in terms of how we organized our work and how we develop a plan, a strategy to reschedule appointments and to really fully open up our business. So first, as we tackled the rescheduled inspections, we had many customers who were proactive themselves. So our public portal was still open to all of our customers, and we found that many of them actually proactively rescheduled those appointments. And you can see in the pie chart to the right that there were about 600 customers who did that. So those people have their appointments already scheduled, and we're ready to serve them. Then staff also focused on those customers, again, whose appointments were previously canceled to see if they were ready to reschedule, and we were able to get many of those customers in for appointments. So that universe is about 900 different customers. So you can see that in totality, we have about 1,500 inspections that have already been rescheduled. We do still have the capacity to address urgent requests as they come in. So just to provide some context for you, on an average day, our building inspection team does about 500 inspection counts. So you see there, we're able to do about 2,500 counts each week. So we have remaining capacity, again, to address any urgent requests that may come in. So then for the universe of unscheduled appointments, so these are appointments that have not yet been rescheduled. And this includes a couple of categories of customers. So first, these includes customers who that we've actually reached out to, and they've indicated, hey, we're really not ready to gear back up, or we've decided to do a phased approach, and we're just not ready to schedule yet. And then there are some customers who we have just not been able to connect with. So that universe is about 500. I'm sorry, can you go back, Kip? And just wanted to note that as we've been doing outreach to some of our customers on the small projects, particularly for the single family, like home remodel projects, some customers have indicated to us that, hey, you know what, we're really not ready to have an inspector in our home yet, so we'll get back to you. So I just wanted to note that. And then looking into the future, we're going to be working hand in hand with our customers in terms, particularly for the high impact projects, around what their new construction schedules look like and when they might be ready for us to come out on site to schedule those. Okay, next slide. So, because we know how important it is for our customers to be able to reach us, get the answers they need, and get their inspection scheduled, we have put together a team that will serve as our point of contact for our customers. So our two building division managers, Bill Main and Mark Garcia, are on point to receive those requests, answer questions. And then we're also coordinating with the EOC liaison branch through the OED development facilitation, and Emily LaPoma has also been tapped to serve as a point of contact for our customers. Next slide. So I did want to share a little bit about some of the tactics that we are looking at. Last week, Chris Burton shared many of those with you. I just wanted to take a moment to highlight permit extensions, because we have heard from some of our customers how important that's going to be in terms of for them to be able to move their projects along. We know there are many impacts. There are many impacts to schedule. There are many financial impacts. So schedules for projects have definitely changed. So regarding building permit extensions, this is actually housed in Title II of the Muni Code. And it currently authorizes the building official to extend building permits for up to 100 days. In addition, if customers can demonstrate that there are extreme circumstances or hardships, the building official can also provide an additional 360-day extension. So we think that these extensions that currently are allowed will accommodate our projects. We've just heard from probably 2 or 3 customers who have indicated that they will in fact need those extensions. Next slide. So on the planning side, our planning permit extensions, or what we call entitlements, those are housed in Title 20, our zoning ordinance. And currently the code reads that these planning permits have a life of 2 years. The code also allows 2 one-year extensions that applicants can apply for. And it is an administrative process. Customers can come into the first floor and get it handled administratively. There is a small fee associated with that. So as we're thinking and moving forward, we have a couple of recommendations around extending planning permits. We're recommending that we actually just eliminate the administrative process. So instead of customers having to fill out paperwork, we can just do it by request via email. And then secondly, in terms of amending the ordinance, we're looking at or suggesting that either the ordinance can be changed to authorize the director to grant unlimited number of one-year extensions, as long as the customer can obviously just demonstrate that there are unique circumstances, and then the director would have the discretion to extend those permits by 1 year. Or should the council decide, you could just change the expiration term from 2 years to 4 years for all planning permits. So we are on track to bring these ordinance changes to council in early August. And I think that is my last slide. That concludes my presentation. I will turn it back over to Kip.
Thank you, Rosalind. Appreciate all the good work and the opportunity to spend a little bit of time with your inspectors in the field. It was really quite inspiring. So that's it for us. That's the update of some of the key highlights of the last 7 days in the Emergency Operations Center. The only thing I'll say in clarification, apparently I caused some confusion when I said that I'm rotating out. I'm really not going very far. Lee and I rotate in and out with one of us being the primary Emergency Operations Center director. The other one technically becomes the assistant director and spends that other off week working on special projects and future planning and going into deeper future work rather than the day-to-day operational issues. So I'm not going anywhere, but Lee is tagging in as of today as the former EOC director, and we'll both be back here next week. So on behalf of Lee Wilcox, myself, and the 563 members of the Emergency Operations Center, thank you very much, and turning it back to you, Dave.
All right, thanks, Kip. So that concludes our update, Mayor and Council, and we're available for questions.